And Good Friday evening. We'll have more on that state of emergency in Florida, but we want to start with that brutal day on Wall Street, capped with another market sell-off. There are growing concerns of a recession on a global scale. Take a look. The Dow notching a new low for the year, closing below 30,000 for the first time since mid-June. All the major averages seen their fifth negative week in the last 6. It comes 2 days after the Fed raised interest rates by 75 basis points again and suggested they'll do the same in November as they try to fight record inflation. Overseas, the British pound hitting a 3-decade low against the U.S. dollar as a new economic plan in the U.K. rattled European markets. So is all of this signaling even bigger problems ahead? We want to get right to one of our newest correspondents here at NBC News, business and data reporter Brian Chung. So, Brian, first off, we're reporting the Dow nearing a bear market territory. Explain to our viewers what exactly that means.
Well, the Dow is in a bear market, and essentially what that means is it's down 20% from its most recent high, which was measured around New Year's Eve at around 37,000. Obviously, a far fall from that, just falling 1.6% today. The S&P 500 was already in a bear market, and by the way, closed today at its lowest level since December 2020, not a time frame you want to compare it against. Now, what we did see in the middle of this year, essentially between June and August, was some rebound that had some investors wondering if they had seen the worst. The market declined since that point in time, especially this week's action alone, reaffirming to investors that the worst is yet to come.
All right, Brian, so Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell has said time and time again the best tool to fight inflation is raising interest rates. But some investors think the Fed has gone too far. Let's take a listen.
Listen, the Fed has just, executed the last 2 years one of the biggest policy mistakes in the 110-year history of the Fed by staying so easy when everything was booming and pointing to, my God, inflation is going to be a terrible problem.
Jeremy Siegel there from Wharton University. So does he have a point there, or is there nothing else to do but raise rates to get inflation under control?
Well, certainly a lot of questions about what got us to this point. And one of the arguments, as we heard from the professor there, is that the Federal Reserve, the nation's central bank, the steward of the economy, was simply too late to the game on inflation. That because they did not start raising rates until March of this year, they were behind the ball on getting ahead of raising borrowing costs to make it more expensive to take some steam out of the economy. Now, the Federal Reserve is doing that exactly right now. The message from Fed Chair Jay Powell is that's going to continue with the expectation that the Fed is going to have to further raise interest rates. The question is, what's the cost of that going to be? The only thing worse than high inflation will be high inflation alongside job losses, which could come as the Fed makes the borrowing costs more expensive. That's something that is definitely a concern.
Yeah, that's the tricky formula there. So finally, real quick, moving overseas to the UK, the new government hoping to reunite growth through tax cuts. How is that impacting global markets?
A big story, Tom, today is certainly the chancellor coming out in that newly formed government announcing that they would like to pursue tax cuts during a time of double-digit inflation in that country. The market reception not good at all, with the British pound sterling falling by about 3.5% against the U.S. dollar to levels we have not seen in some time. Warnings from Larry Summers that could become parity like the euro. Definitely something worth watching.
Yeah, and that's what some of the global fears are happening, along with what's happening in the U.S. All right, Brian, thanks for leading us off tonight. For more on the market tumble and how it could impact your savings, I want to bring in a top story friend here, editor-in-chief of Investopedia, Caleb Silver. He joins us now live on set. So, Caleb, talk to us. People are going to be looking at their 401ks going, what has happened?
Yeah, well, they've seen a massive downdraft in their 401ks, and the end is not necessarily in sight because, as Brian pointed out, the Federal Reserve is going to continue raising rates until we get to about 4.5% on the Fed funds rate. That's a ways from here. So a couple more rate hikes, and rate hikes put pressure on stocks. Investors have been bailing out to the dollar and government bonds.
Caleb, if people are looking at their 401ks, and sometimes people recommend you shouldn't during a time like this, what is the average loss? Do we know what the percentages are, how bad it is? And again, we should say it's been several years of great news for 401ks, but this is obviously tough.
Yeah, bear markets, the average downturn is about 34%, and they last around 290 days or so. The last one was very quick because it happened right at the beginning of the pandemic. Then we had all that government money flowing in, and interest rates were floored to zero. The big difference this time, the Fed is raising rates as the economy is slowing. That is putting pressure on risky assets like stocks, like cryptocurrencies. That's what we're feeling now. We'll get through this eventually, but it could take 6 to 12 months.
Let's talk about three groups: people who are retired, people who are about to retire, and young people, maybe people just starting their careers or just starting to build their 401ks. What should those three individual groups be doing right now?
Yeah, for older folks nearing retirement or in retirement, there's actually a silver lining, Tom, in that you're finally getting some money on your money, whether that's through higher yields at the bank, through CDs or savings or money markets, or through some other funds. So that's finally happening. For younger people, this is a great time to buy stocks at a discount. If you have the money, you can dollar cost average in, get things on sale right now, rebuild your portfolio. Half of the best performing days in the stock market occur during bear markets, which is why you don't sell when they're spinning out of control. You got to be there for the recovery, and that's how you do it. You stay in it, and you keep investing if you can.
Caleb Sipper for us tonight. Caleb, we appreciate it. The other major headline tonight, back-to-back tropical threats. A tropical depression forming in the Caribbean and on track to hit the U.S. A state of emergency declared in 24 Florida counties now. And the system comes right behind Hurricane Fiona's deadly path. We have teams in Bermuda and Puerto Rico where residents are still without power from that storm. But we want to begin with NBC meteorologist Dylan Dreyer, who's here tonight in studio and watching it all for us. Dylan, it feels like we're at that moment where everyone's going to be watching the updates from the National Hurricane Center.
100%, because this storm is gaining in intensity, and we also have to nail down the track. Now, the tropics have gotten very, very active over the last several days. We have Hurricane Fiona, we have Tropical Storm Gaston, we have another storm off the coast of Africa, and of course, we are keeping a very close eye on Tropical Depression 9. Want to touch in on Fiona real quick, because this storm is still a Category 3 hurricane. It's approaching eastern Canada. We could see several inches of rain, perhaps up to 10 inches in some areas. And as the storm weakens, it'll lose the core of its really, really strong winds, but we do still have the potential of seeing gusts up to 70 to 100 miles per hour. That could lead to some power outages, especially with all that rain. Now let's get to Tropical Depression 9. This is the one we're going to be focused on all through the weekend and through the middle of next week. Right now it's moving northwest at 15 miles per hour. Not really much of a threat. However, it's running into some very warm waters. Temperatures in the water about 85 degrees. Now it is going to have a small interaction with Cuba, not enough to really break down this storm all that much. So that's why it goes from perhaps a Category 1 storm on Monday down up to a 2 on Tuesday, perhaps even strengthening to a Category 3 storm, as it's possible it could make landfall somewhere south of Tampa. That would be on Wednesday. Let's just go back through the history books a little bit. It's been 5 years since we've had a landfalling storm on the peninsula of Florida. That means this part of the state, but we're also looking at the chance that this could take a little bit of a turn to the north. This tends to be the trend where we do see a lot of our storms hit along the panhandle of Florida, but either way, that's just history. It doesn't really impact what's going to happen this time around, and we have to keep a very close eye on this all across Florida, Tom.
Yeah, we will be watching. All right, Dylan Dreyer, not missing a beat there. Dylan, we appreciate it. And as Canada's Atlantic coast braces for Fiona's historic punch, it could have been much worse in Bermuda. While in the Caribbean, many are still struggling. Morgan Chesky is in Bermuda tonight.
Tonight, Fiona's wrath far from over. The deadly storm battering Bermuda early this morning, unleashing its now infamous winds on the small island, sideswiped by the powerful hurricane overnight.
This is the worst we've seen so far for Fiona. Even though it is about 100 miles to the west of us, that wind only picking up, and we're seeing the one thing that officials were concerned about, storm surge.
Wind gusts topping 90 miles an hour knocked out power to nearly half the island. Dee Furbert surprised by the power of the glancing blow.
The rain, the wind gust, which was swirling and circulating, that's when I knew it was real.
Remarkably, on the island of more than 60,000 people, officials stress no one was hurt.
Was Bermuda prepared for this one?
Most definitely.
National Security Minister Michael Weeks credits Bermuda's building code, requiring structures to withstand 110-mile-an-hour winds.
We may have lost 2 or 3, maybe 4 roofs, and I say roofs are just parts of them.
The now Category 3 hurricane churning north in the Atlantic towards Canada. NBC's Maggie Vespa is there.
Here in Halifax, Nova Scotia, fear is mounting. This normally packed boardwalk completely empty. Officials are shutting it down tonight. And ferries, public transit here, they're also planning to halt service. This as people stock up on water, non-perishables, utility companies calling for all hands on deck, expecting massive outages. Given Fiona's historic strength and size, as the mayor put it, if you're scared, you're smart.
after ravaging Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic. Fiona's now claimed at least 10 lives and leaves hundreds of thousands without power or water. A brutal reality that could continue for months.
All right, Morgan Chesky joins us now from St. George's, Bermuda. So, Morgan, as you mentioned there in your piece, despite those massive wind gusts, this could have been a lot worse for Bermuda. What are the people you talking to saying?
Yeah, Tom, they're definitely aware that they dodged a bullet. They saw what happened in Puerto Rico, then the Dominican Republic, Turks and Caicos, and they were watching that track incredibly closely. Keep in mind, even though it was more than 150 miles off the western coast, we still had widespread power outages here that have lasted the majority of today and will go likely for the next several days, and very minor scattered damage. People here say that should this have moved just a bit more to the east, it could have been a far different story.
And we know the National Security Administrator there saying those building codes that we talked about last night help prevent massive damage. What else was done there to prevent catastrophe?
Yeah, well, you heard from officials yesterday, Tom, urge everyone to stay off the road starting at 10 p.m., and it really did become a ghost town. They listened to that advice this morning when we went down to the waterfront to check the conditions. There was not a soul in sight. However, just as quickly as this storm moved in, it moved out, and I can tell you, Bermudians are out and about tonight, breathing a much-needed sigh of relief because they know how close they came to this powerful storm. Tom?
They dodged that bullet. All right, Morgan Chesky in Bermuda tonight for Top Story. We want to stay on Hurricane Fiona now because we want to turn to Puerto Rico, where the storm made landfall nearly a week ago. It left behind catastrophic flooding and landslides, and now many on the island are struggling. Ellison Barber on the ground with more.
Bernardo Torres' home flooded in Hurricane Maria, so he built a wall, hoping it wouldn't happen again. Then Fiona came. He and his wife haven't had power for days. The food in their fridge spoiled. There's no running water, and now Puerto Rico is in the middle of a heat wave.
¿Crees que puedas seguir viviendo así?
No se puede. No, hace una calor bárbara, eso uno no puede dormir. Y ella padece depresión y todo, y se vuelve dando vueltas para allí y para acá, no haya qué hacer.
In bigger cities like San Juan, the power is on, and there's really not a whole lot of damage. But you come to communities like this, Salinas, and there's just destruction everywhere you look. ¿Qué pasó aquí?
Aquí una catástrofe.
Roughly 2/3 of homes and businesses on the island are still without power. Luma, the company that has overseen the electric power transmission and distribution system in Puerto Rico since June of 2021, says they have 2,000 utility workers on the ground trying to restore power as quickly as possible. But Puerto Ricans we spoke to say it's not fast enough. And after Hurricane Maria, the power grid was supposed to be stronger.
I think that we are stuck in the time because we don't need nothing from Maria. The government doesn't need nothing from Maria. The United States sent a lot of money to fix destruction from Maria, but we are still the same.
Luis Mejias is filling up buckets of water on the side of the highway. From pipes residents jerry-rigged to gather rainwater running off of the mountain. And he's not alone.
¿Cuánta agua necesita en este momento?
Bueno, bastante, porque ahora mismo no tenemos ni para hacer los alimentos. Pero el nene no sabe, ¿entiende? Entonces él no entiende esto. Que por lo menos él vea que uno está pasando trabajo y él a veces me pregunta, ¿por qué va a buscar agua? Y digo, pero es que necesitamos agua para bajar el toile, para poderte bañar.
Officials say most people will have full service in a matter of days, but those without power aren't so sure.
I don't have faith in this government. That we have to make our life by ourselves.
So they're working together, expecting the worst, but praying for better.
And Ellison Barber joins Top Story live tonight from Guaynabo, Puerto Rico. Ellison, I got to be honest with you, seeing those images of Americans having to get water, drinking water from makeshift PVC pipes and plastic bottles, it's been nearly a week now. So I want to ask you, you've been on the ground for a while, is the situation there getting any better?
In
parts in pockets, particularly more populated areas, you have moments of thinking, okay, maybe things are looking up. But then you go just a little further out of places like San Juan and you realize how far this island is from being back to normal. I mean, there are deep systemic issues here when it comes to the power grid. The power grid in Puerto Rico was neglected for decades before Hurricane Maria, even before Hurricane Fiona. This time around, there have been issues just in the last year where the entire island had a blackout. So there have been a series of issues. There are a lot of layers here. It is complicated. And then on top of things right now, the power company, or the primary power company, Luma, they say that they're running into just present day logistical issues. We're standing in front of a parking lot that is hard to see right now because it is dark, but it's partially collapsed. We've seen this happen with roads as well. And Luma says some of their utility crews are having difficulty accessing lines and transmitters that they need to repair because there are roads that are unstable and there's still so much debris across a lot of this island. But Tom, you mentioned watching people getting water from those PVC pipes. For a lot of people who live here, Puerto Ricans, all of that information, that might be an explanation for why they're here right now, but it's not an excuse, and people are fed up. Tom?
They should be. All right, Ellison Barber with some incredible reporting from Puerto Rico tonight. Ellison, we thank you. Next tonight's a horrifying new video that shows a train slamming into a police car while a woman was handcuffed inside. She is alive but suffered serious injuries, and many are asking, how could this happen? Ron Allen has a story, and we want to warn you, this video may be difficult to watch.
Tonight's shocking body cam and dash cam video released by the Fort Lupton Police Department in Colorado.
Stay back!
Showing the moment a train slams into a patrol car. All while 20-year-old Yareni Rios Gonzalez is cuffed and in the back seat.
It's just mind-boggling that this could occur. Never park a car on a set of train tracks for any amount of time, even if you think it's abandoned.
The 8-minute video was clip-edited and redacted by Fort Lupton Police and handed over to our affiliate KUSA after a records request was made.
I'm going to your passenger side.
The incident took place over a week ago. Fort Lupton police were responding to a road rage incident with a gun.
Keep your hands above your head.
Don't move. Police pulled over and arrested Rios Gonzalez.
Where are you taking me? We're taking you to the car.
And placed her in their cruiser, parked right on the tracks.
Do you have anything on you that's going to poke me, stick me, hurt me? No, ma'am, but can I please get my cell phone? We'll get your cell phone in a second. Is there any weapons in the car?
Ready?
No, ma'am, there's nothing on. There's no weapons in the car?
The video cuts to officers searching her car for a gun.
Tossed it out the window?
She could have, out that window, but...
That's when you hear the first train horn in the distance.
No, that's, time check. Oh my God.
The clip, heavily edited, then cuts to another officer's body cam.
Stay back!
Then to a dashboard cam showing another officer standing next to the unit with the suspect inside as the train barrels down the tracks. Chaos continues as police realize what happened.
Status medical emergent. The suspect was in the vehicle that was hit by the train.
Amazingly, Rios Gonzalez is alive in this totaled squad car. She suffered 9 broken ribs, a broken arm, a fractured sternum, and numerous other injuries to her head, leg, and back, her attorney told NBC News.
There may still be a firearm in the vehicle. I don't know if you guys have been through it yet.
The video again cuts to police continuing their search for a weapon.
Here's your gun.
Multiple legal analysts believe the officers could be charged.
This was absolutely reckless behavior.
The Fort Lupton Police Department posted a statement saying they released the video in keeping with their transparency policy. Also saying investigators with the Colorado Bureau of Investigation and the District Attorney's Office are looking into this incident. The Plateville police chief telling NBC News the officer from his department that was involved has been placed on paid administrative leave while the investigation is completed. So far, the woman in the car, Rios Gonzalez, has not been charged. Her attorney telling the Denver Post he blames the officers for her injuries, saying, quote, "It's kind of unbelievable they did something like this." Ron Allen, NBC News.
Okay, we want to turn overseas now to a story we've been covering all week. In Iran, protests sweeping across the country following the death of a young woman in police custody. And now the government is organizing rallies to counter the anti-government unrest. Ali Arouzi, the only Western broadcast reporter in Iran, reporting tonight for Top Story.
For a 7th straight day, violent protests have gripped dozens of cities across Iran, sparked by the death of a 22-year-old woman after she was arrested by the feared morality police, accused of violating a strictly enforced Islamic dress code. Police deemed that the pants Mahsa Amini was wearing under her required robe were too tight. Within hours of being taken into custody, she was brain dead. 3 days later, dead.
And it really breaks my heart when I think about the situation, because she had her whole life in front of her.
Iran's morality police, now sanctioned by the US Treasury Department. Protesters, many of them young women, poured onto the streets despite knowing there could be a brutal crackdown and arrests. Since the 1979 Islamic Revolution, it's been mandatory for women to wear headscarves or face jail time. Yet, over the last several days in cities across the country, women have been burning their headscarves and cutting their hair with large crowds cheering them on. In response, police have beaten protesters with clubs and fired live rounds and water cannons at unarmed demonstrators, while throttling the internet and blocking apps. Though today, the US government announced new efforts to expand internet access to the Iranian people.
Iran must end its use of violence against women for exercising their fundamental freedoms.
Since the protests began, the Iranian government say 26 people have died. Restraint now in short order. Activists and journalists are being arrested, including Niloufar Hamedi, who broke the story about Amini.
You heard it right there. Activists and journalists now also being arrested. Ali joins us now from Tehran. Ali, these protests don't show any signs of slowing down. We've been covering this all week. How is the government planning to handle this if it continues?
Hey, Tom. Well, they're already deploying a massive security presence across the country. They're asking people that are loyal to them to come out onto the streets and show allegiance against the supporters. And the chief of the judiciary is telling prosecutors to hand down harsh sentences and to do it quickly. And of course, they're throttling the internet so people can't mobilize and upload videos of the protests.
And Ali, speaking of that, I know even for you and your team, getting your reports out, even getting this live image out has been a challenge because of the issues with the internet, the government cracking down to try to get and stop information from spreading. I understand the U.S. is pitching in to help the Iranian people right now.
That's right. Secretary Blinken said that the U.S. want to help the Iranian people access internet, to not be blocked by the Iranian government, to help them with digital communications, to counter the Iranian government censorship. And interestingly, Tom, right under Secretary Blinken's tweet, Elon Musk tweeted, activating Starlink. That's been a hot topic of conversation here in Iran, whether the Starlink will bring internet to people here and then give them greater access to communication.
We're back now with a new fentanyl warning. Los Angeles officials sounding the alarm after at least 7 teenagers have overdosed in recent weeks. And authorities are concerned young people are being tricked into consuming the dangerous opioid due to the rainbow-colored pills. They almost look like candy. Miguel Almaguer has the details.
Tonight, one of the largest school districts in the country announcing it will now provide the medication Narcan to every school, kindergarten through 12th grade, to help reverse overdoses after at least 7 teenagers OD'd in the last month on pills, possibly containing fentanyl, according to police.
We are experiencing a devastating epidemic.
The latest overdose, a 15-year-old found unconscious in his home last Saturday, according to officers. The NBC LA investigative team found fentanyl-related deaths in LA County have increased by more than 1,700%, from less than 100 in 2016 to more than 1,600 in 2021. Many of the deaths are young people. The Narcan announcement coming a week after another 15-year-old, Melanie Ramos, died in her high school bathroom from overdosing on a pill, officials said.
Mi niña tiene 15 años, es muy chica. Son niños y ellos no saben.
Her family asking for the schools to do more to protect her and other students.
Las escuelas, los maestros, todos tienen que estar más al pendiente de su trabajo, porque parece que aquí nos fallaron.
2 teens have now been arrested in connection with several drug overdoses, including hers.
The fabric of our community is destroyed. One child, one soul at a time.
We're not solving the bigger problem, but this is a short-term gap to a longer-term solution.
Nicholas Matthews used to be a teen opioid addict. Now he runs a substance abuse treatment facility in California.
The immediate solution is to reduce the harm by allowing people to test the drugs that they have, to make sure that there's no fentanyl present, to make sure that Narcan and these other life-saving drugs are readily available.
The California Department of Public Health also warning school leaders in a letter this week about a potentially fatal drug they call, quote, rainbow fentanyl, found in pills and powders in a variety of bright colors, shapes, and sizes. They say could attract young people. In July, the LA Field Division of the DEA seized about 1 million pills in Inglewood, a record-breaking bust. But the rise in opioid overdoses among teens is not only a problem in LA, it's seen across the country. According to a research letter that analyzed data from the CDC, fentanyls were involved in about 77% of those overdose deaths last year. Just look at the spike in fentanyl overdoses compared to other drugs.
I remember when I was younger, overdoses would generally only occur through intravenous abuse. You would have to inject the substance in order to overdose on it. Now you see people overdosing just by taking pills. It's a really, really scary thing.
Experts say schools should brace for the worst, but a good first step is parents sitting down with their children and talking about drug use in a safe space. It can be the best step to preventing drug use. Tom?
Miguel Almaguer for us tonight from Los Angeles. Miguel, we thank you for that. When we come back, the deadly standoff in Chicago. SWAT officers responding to gunshots inside a home when it was suddenly set on fire. The grim discovery inside. Stay with us. All right, we're back now with Top Stories news feed, and we begin with the deadly standoff in a Chicago suburb. Video shows heavily armed SWAT officers outside of a home in Oak Forest. You can see them right there. Police responding to multiple gunshots from inside the home. A child was seen running out before the house went up in flames. Authorities found 4 people dead inside, including the suspected gunman. An update tonight on a carriage house horse collapse in New York City. We first told you about this last month. The horse's owner is now facing charges, get this, after he allegedly falsified birth records and tried to pass the animal off as 13 years old. However, a veterinarian who checked the horse after the fall found it to be around 26 years old, too old to be a licensed carriage horse in that city. Turning now to money talks, and tonight, a red-hot rental market. The FBI wants you to be on the lookout, though, for a scam surging across the country, targeting people desperate for housing. Vicki Wynn has what you need to know.
Rents hitting an all-time high. The average one-bedroom, $1,770 a month, up 39% from last year. In 10 major cities, the average one-bedroom now costs more than $3,000 a month. The FBI is now warning renters this hot market is a hotbed for fraud.
All over this country, as rents, home prices increase, as inflation goes, we're seeing scams.
Special Agent Brian Galuli says overseas scammers can use multiple online rental platforms, taking real photos and descriptions to make bogus listings. We found dozens of suspicious offers, including this one for a Manhattan apartment listed for $1,000 cheaper than similar units. I'm Vicki Wynn. So I called to ask why.
You're renting directly from the owner of the place. I explained this to you at the start of my conversation earlier.
Yeah, Wilson, the thing is, we called the owner of the apartment building, and they say this is not their listing, that they did not put this apartment on rent on Craigslist. So is this a scam or is this for real?
Okay, that is not a problem. So you can go ahead and rent it from the person that you call.
So what are you doing, Wilson, with this apartment rental? He hung up. In 2021, renters lost more than $350 million to these scams, a 64% increase from the previous year. Christina Ivorone says she was scammed out of nearly $8,000 after sending money to secure a room in this New York apartment that she never saw in person.
It was like perfect for a first apartment.
But when she showed up after a 3-hour drive from Rhode Island, she discovered the apartment didn't exist, and the person she'd been talking to ghosted her.
I had everything in my U-Haul. I had my dog. We were ready. I had plans for the next day to go to a picnic with some friends, and now I was trying to figure out where I was going to live.
Are there any red flags when it comes to the listing?
Obviously looking for a deal that's too good to be true, or is if someone is saying that they're out of the country, or that there is a need for speed.
How often are these people brought to justice?
We're focusing our efforts more on the prevention side because once the money is gone, it is extremely difficult to recover.
If you get caught up in this scam, call your bank right away to try and stop payment and report the crime to the FBI at ic3.gov. A reminder in this red-hot rental market to look for those red flags. Back to you.
Time now for Top Stories Global Watch and the deadly landslides hitting El Salvador. New video showing the devastation just south of the capital, San Salvador. This structure completely destroyed, the storm leaving a mangled mess of metal and debris. At least 7 people killed, including 3 children. Authorities say 4 days of heavy rain triggered those landslides. Oil workers are on strike in Argentina after a deadly explosion at a refinery. Take a look at some of this video. This is surveillance video capturing that blast in the southwestern province of Neuquén. At least 3 workers killed. No word yet on the cause, but the country's largest oil and gas workers union launched an indefinite strike until safety measures are improved. And voters in Italy head to the polls this weekend for a crucial election. Here's why. Far-right candidate Giorgia Meloni is expected to become the country's new prime minister. Her party, Brothers of Italy, has deep roots in neo-fascism. If elected, she would be the first far-right leader Italy has seen since Mussolini. The country is currently dealing with economic instability worsened by the war in Ukraine. Okay, now to the Americas, focusing on stories from the U.S. and Latin America. The economic output of U.S. Latinos reaching close to $3 trillion, showing that if U.S. Latinos were an independent country, their GDP would rank 5th in the world. Gotti Schwartz has more details.
Across the country, trillion-dollar statistics emerging from the Latino community. A new study finding that if U.S. Latinos were a country, their gross domestic product would rank 5th largest in the world. And to see what that looks like, look no further than Rose Trujeque's front porch.
So you guys just bought this home 2 months ago?
Yes, this is home sweet home. Come on in.
Home sweet home.
Over the last few years, she's gone back to school.
Every morning I can tell myself I have to do this and I have to do this. And, you know, no matter what, how tired I come home.
She's earning more, spending more, and one of a growing number of new homeowners, mirroring the findings of a new report that shows while average wages shrank overall, Latino salaries grew, as did spending, education, and home purchases more than any other demographic, translating into a $2.8 trillion economic engine for the U.S. economy. All despite the community being disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. More than half of all Latinos say someone close to them died or was hospitalized with COVID-19.
If you were looking for a synonym for the Latino cohort, you would start with the word resilient.
Sol Trujillo, co-founder of the Latino Donor Collaborative, says during the pandemic, much of that growth came from new Latino-owned small businesses and families persevering, pivoting, or taking on other jobs to make ends meet.
We have work ethic, and we stay tried and true to those principles, regardless whether it's rain or shine.
Or pandemic.
Or pandemic.
While Rose tells us, after years of struggle, for her, the American dream has finally come true.
We have something that we can afford and call it home. So it's a good feeling.
Gotti Schwartz, NBC News, Los Angeles.
Thank you for watching Top Story all week. I'm Tom Llamas in New York. Stay right there. There's more news on the way.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.